Get off your ash. That's right, you heard me. Confronting what happened to us in the past in order to understand who we are in the present so we can be who we want to be in the future. It's time to stop allowing what happened to you yesterday to continue affecting what you do and who you are today. This podcast is going to challenge you and push you outside of your comfort zone. So, if you're ready to get off your ash, let's go. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Get Off Your Ash podcast. I got to tell you, man, I've been having just the best time traveling across the country, sharing at churches and different events about Get Off Your Ash. And it's been just such a great experience. In fact, if you'd like to have me come out and speak at one of your events, just let me know. Check out getoffyourash.today, and you can send me an email. And, you know, it's funny, every time I go out and I start talking about it, the initial reaction is always the same. Whoa, like, what are you talking about? Like, that sounds a lot like another word and all that kind of stuff. But once I get going and I start teaching about Job and I get into the nitty gritty of the message, the response is always the same. People are like, wow, there's so much more here than meets the eye. And it's been really rewarding hearing amazing testimonies and stories of people who have been really impacted by the message of Get Off Your Ash and the story of Job. It's been wonderful. So usually I'm always the guy talking in these podcasts. And so today I want to do something a little bit differently. I've invited someone to come on the podcast. You're going to meet them in just a second. And they're going to talk about what life can be like, you know, once you're willing to take that bold step and get off your ash, to deal with that past, deal with that stuff that's been holding you back. I'm always telling you how great it is, but I wanted someone else to come on with a different perspective and talk about how much it's impacted their lives. And I'm going to ask them some really important questions that I know a lot of you who are watching and listening are going to resonate with. So today I'm going to invite my good friend, Randy Robison, and let's hear what he has to say. All right, all the way from the Dallas, Texas area, I am thrilled to have Randy Robison on the program today. Thanks for being with us today, Randy.
It's great to be with you, Joe. I've really enjoyed our conversations in the past, and it's fun to be on your show.
You know, it's kind of cool because we've only known each other for a few months, but we've actually never met. It's only been over Zoom every time.
True. Well, if they'll let you out of Canada, we can remedy that.
We can go out. I just need an invitation. Now, listen, I know who you are and I know what you do, but for people who are either watching or listening for the first time, tell me a little bit about your background so they know, who we're talking to today.
Sure. So I am Randy Robison. My father is James Robison. My mother is Betty Robison. And they have been, my dad's been a preacher since he was like 17 years old, and he's 78 now. And
Wow.
so he has been on television since the 70s, and then daily format, Monday through Friday, pretty consistently. I know since the early 90s, and I haven't been with him the entire time. So I was kind of raised in that televangelist world, and so I've always enjoyed television and communication. I also like to write. But I kind of tried to run from that for a while. But, it's kind of like Christian ministry, especially media ministry, is a little bit like the mafia. You try to get out, but they keep pulling you back in, So, no, I'm glad to be here and feel called to be here.
Well, that is the first time I've ever heard ministry described like the mafia. So that's new for me. That's good.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's got its own rules as well. We got our mafia rules for ministry. It's codified. So.
Okay, well, I guess Dallas and Toronto are a little bit different, but that's all right. Well, a couple months back, you had me on your daily live web show, and I know you do the TV show as well, but you also provide like a daily web streaming thing.
Yep.
And I was on there, and we talked about Get Off Your Ash, and I was able to tell you about my stuff and talk about that. And then I said, I'm always doing the talking on these podcasts, and that's fine. I'm a speaker and that's what I do. But I said, I want to start having people on the podcast who can tell me their stories. And, it's not just, this guy, Joe, harping on get off your ash. No. there are people who actually have done this and have done it successfully and are enjoying, life. And so, I sent you some questions that I thought would be fun to talk about today, and you answered right back and say, "I got something for you."
Yeah.
So here's the question I want everybody to know. I said, "What's the most fun, rewarding, or exciting thing that you've ever been able to do in your life?"
Right. And I would love to tell you about, my journeys around the world, Africa or China or my favorite Ireland. Um, but I decided to go with the rewarding instead of just the fun, because
Mm,
this is not a travel show as far as I know. Um,
right.
and so my huge reward that involved risk, and was something I really didn't have to do. Um, well, let me back up. It starts when I
Sure.
was born. Uh,
We're going far
because
back.
yeah, let's go to the beginning.
All right.
And it's because I'm adopted. James and Betty
Okay.
Robison adopted me. They had a daughter. The doctor said my mother couldn't have any more children. My dad wanted a son. He adopted me, and 3 years later, they surprised they had another daughter. So I was in the middle, sisters on both
Okay.
sides. And I was raised in a loving Christian, strong home. My sisters never made me feel like anything but their brother. My parents never made me feel anything but their son.
Mm,
And I think part of it's my personality and of course the grace of God. I never struggled with, some of the rejection issues that some adoptees might.
sure.
Um, and I that was never an issue with me. So I grow up in a normal Southern Baptist Texas kind of home, um, which is to say not quite normal, but close enough. Go to college, went to Oral Roberts University, met my wife. I met a girl there that I made my wife. Um,
Hmm.
we graduated, got married a week later. And a couple years after that, early 90s, we had our first child. And when my daughter was born, the doctors asked those questions. Does this run in your family? Does
Oh,
this run in
okay.
your family? My answer is, I don't know.
I don't
I
know.
don't know. Yeah. We had our second child 15 months later. So shortly after that, my wife was pregnant again, and they started going through this list, and there were some potential complications with our son that they were screening for. We had to do additional sonograms. Everything turned out normal, so that
Hmm.
was not an issue. He's
Yeah.
great. But in the process, I'm going. There's things I don't know that is now. These things are impacting potentially my children.
Hmm.
So all of a sudden, I felt a responsibility to find out some things related to my adoption, because I was having children.
Sure.
So this is pre-internet days. I go down to the courthouse in Dallas. I was born in Dallas County, and started doing some research. I had a little information from the lawyer that handled the adoption. It was a private adoption between my biological mother's doctor and a lawyer, that is a longtime friend of my dad and still alive. And so he gave me what information with my parents' blessing
Hmm.
to track her down. And just by going through old court records, I managed to find her. So when I was 25 years old, I looked, oh, I found her in the phone book of all things. She was
Yeah.
still here, very local. I mean, right. I called her up and she said hello. And I said, is this, and I gave her first name. She said, yes. And then I said, is this, and I gave her last name, but it was her maiden name. And,
Hmm.
and she goes, yeah, who is this? You
Yeah.
know? And I said, well, I, you don't really know me, um, but 25 years ago, you made a decision that I'm guessing was probably a difficult decision
Hmm.
when you gave me up for adoption. And now I'm 25. I've got two now. We have a newborn. I have two beautiful children, a wonderful
Hmm.
wife. I had a great childhood. I've had a great life, and I just wanted to say thank you.
Oh.
So when she stopped crying, you know, she said, "Can we
Oh.
meet?" And that was over 25 years ago. Still got a great relationship with her. I've had all these
Oh.
wonderful years. Got a lot of my medical questions answered.
Sure.
Um, Found out I have, you know, a couple of half brothers, you know.
Mm,
So there was a lot there, and it was resolution for a lot of things. Now, that's just the first part of the story.
okay.
Um, she told me that her first husband, they were married briefly, and they had one son, and then they were divorced or separated
Hmm.
when she's pregnant with me, and so I was born after they had gotten divorced. And
Oh,
so,
okay.
she told me that this is the story with your father. And so I kind of had my questions answered. I talked to my older brother. He said, I invited him to my graduation, to my wedding. I never got any response. He's clearly not interested. So I
Hmm.
didn't track him down. A couple years later, I moved back to Oklahoma, to Tulsa, where my wife and I had met. And during that time, he passed away. I never met him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I didn't know where to find him. So it wasn't like, I just didn't do the research. So once the internet, came up over that time, I moved back to Texas in 2002, and I started digging around a little bit. Well, I found all sorts of records real fast, and that's when I found his death record.
Oh, okay.
And so I thought, well, you know, I kind of regret not trying to track him down, even though there's clearly, he wasn't interested. He may not even know that. I don't know, because I asked my mom, did he know that you were pregnant when y'all got divorced? Because it was early on, and she said, I don't know. You know, she
Mhm.
she got married a couple years later after that, so I have a younger half brother by that, and she's been married since then. I mean, it's like 40 years of marriage.
Okay.
Um, I no, oh my gosh, it'll be 50 years. She's been married 50 years to the same guy. So I had that regret. So go another, I don't know what about 18 years. My kids, I'm on ancestry.com a lot. I'm
Okay.
interested in that type of thing. And they, started coming out with their DNA tests here about what, five,
Hmm.
6 years ago.
Yeah.
My kids for Father's Day bought me one because
Mine too. Okay.
did you? Okay, so you
Yeah.
get that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this question, Joe. When you took your DNA test, did you realize that the man you thought was your father was not your father?
No, man, mine was pretty boring. It seems like I found out I'm Portuguese.
You're
That's it.
Portuguese? Well, see,
And I
now
knew
that
that.
was that was one of my tips because I came up 70% Irish. And I'm
Oh,
like,
no way.
I've done the research. So part of the story was that I met the family of the man that I thought was my biological
Thought.
father.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And they actually reached out to me, and I actually had an interesting relationship with his sister, whom I thought was my aunt. Um,
Okay.
and so when I started having questions about this, one of the first places I went was to her. Because I said, "Well, is there a chance your brother was adopted? Could that would explain the
Sure. The
inconsistencies,
Irish. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
the Irish, and then none of them showing up as close DNA links, on what I thought was my paternal side." And so she helped me navigate that, and she was sad. She said, "I don't want to lose you as a nephew." And I said, "No," I said, "But in Christ, we will always be family."
Sure.
And right, so very sweet relationship there. In fact, she passed away a few years ago, and they asked me to do her funeral.
Oh,
So so that was an interesting thing. But I figured out finally. I was like obsessed with it. My wife was like, "You are out of your mind." I had charts and things posted to the wall.
oh, you're
Who
one of
am
those.
I?
Yeah.
Yeah, who am
Okay.
I?
Who am I?
I'm reaching out to cousins that I don't know all over the country. Make a long story short, I found out that my biological father was still alive, and he was in
No
Texas.
way.
Yeah, his house
Wow.
was about a mile off of a major freeway here that I'd been driving up and down because my youngest daughter was getting ready to go to college down near
Okay.
near there.
That's
And
crazy.
I look at my wife and I go, "We've driven close to his house 3, 4 times in the last 5 months." I'm like, I want to go visit." Now,
Okay.
okay, right. So
Right. Right.
I want to go visit a man who doesn't know I exist. Um, that, I mean,
Wow.
I don't know him, I don't, he could be, he could be anything. He could have serious mental health issues. He may
Sure.
have addiction issues. He may be calling me every week asking for money, you
Hmm.
know? I don't know anything about this guy other than I'm pretty sure he's my biological father. Didn't even know that for sure. It could have been his brother, I thought maybe. Anyway, so what do you do? My wife's like, I'm like, I'm gonna call him. She's like, you are out of your mind, but you got to do. And here's the thing, Joe.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. When I thought that my biological mother's first husband was my biological father, and I didn't reach out to him, and then he passed
Right.
away, I regretted that.
Yeah, I get that.
And then I find out, almost 20 years later, that I've got a do-over,
Yeah.
right?
Wow, literally. Yeah.
Li- Exactly. I mean, how often does that happen?
No, not
And
very often now.
that's the point I want your viewers and listeners to consider. If you have been afraid to take the risk in a relationship in the past, because of the unknown, because of maybe past hurts, um,
Sure.
if you get that chance, if you get that do-over, consider taking that risk.
Mhm.
I told my wife, he can slam the door on my face, deny
Right.
that he's my father, and say, "Don't ever come see me again." And I'll say, and I said, that's okay. I'm not going to have the regret that I didn't do something.
That's it, man.
I didn't make the effort. So I called him. Found out he had gotten divorced in the mid '80s, and that he had been married since shortly after that. So he's got a wife of 30 something years.
Okay.
Um, and told him I was going to visit drop my daughter off at college, and I'd love to come by. And he's like, "Now, how?" Because I started dropping names of some of my cousins,
Okay.
my newfound
Yeah.
cousins that he knew.
Oh, okay.
They had been helping me find him to figure out how I fit in. And so
Wow,
he's
it's
like, "Yeah,
crazy.
I know, right?" He's like, "Yeah, I know her. How's she doing?" I'm like, "Well, she's living up in Jersey now." "Oh, yeah, okay." And so just weird conversation, and he said, "Yeah, come on by." And I said, "Well, that'd be great. I'd love if you have any old photos of family members, I'd love to put that on Ancestry and
Mhm.
and just want to." Yeah, he's like, "Well, yeah, your family, come on by." He's like 80 years old at that point.
Okay.
So we dropped my daughter off at college, and we're driving back, and I'm like, "Okay, we got to make this stop." And my wife's like, "I don't even know what to think about you, but whatever, do what you got to do."
Yeah. It's a good wife.
Yeah. Totally supportive, but thinking you're crazy, right?
I have one of those.
So we go by this house, and it's a modest house. Everything looks fine there. No immediate concerns. Find out that his wife has left to go to shopping or something. She thought I was a scam, and I was going to try to ask him for money. She's like, nobody just
Oh.
calls and says, I'm a relative and I want to come by,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
Okay.
which was another funny storyline. But so we have a nice visit, and he asked me at some point, now, how are you connected to the family? And I said, well, I'm not 100% sure because I was
Dude, you
adopted as
must have been,
first.
like, freaking out a little bit, though. You're excited, but you gotta be a little nervous.
Well,
No?
God's honest truth, I thought his brother was my biological father
Oh, okay, okay.
because of the circumstances and things.
Okay.
Which, when I told them that later, they all laughed because they're like, "Tom, no, never." It was like
Okay.
didn't fit the profile at all. Um,
Okay.
so we had a great conversation. I showed him photographs of my biological mother and said, "Do you know her?" And he's like, "I don't think so." So the next day he emails me, and says, "Now, wh- where was your mother born, and where did he
Mhm.
ask some details on her? Ask when I was born too." Sent them all back. The next day, it's on a Tuesday because we visited him on a Sunday. The next day, Tuesday, he calls and says, "When are you coming back through?" town. I said, well,
Okay.
probably be a few months. Why? He goes, well, there's something I want to tell you. I said, can you tell me on the
Hmm.
phone? You know?
Yeah.
Well, I think I'm the one you're looking for.
Wow.
I said, are you, just to be clear, are you saying that you think you're my biological father? And he said, yeah, I do.
Wow.
All right. It just
Yeah.
incidentally, this was already planned. The next morning, I got on a flight, flew to Philadelphia, and had a 7-hour layover.
Hmm.
The whole family's from Philadelphia. They're all from Philly.
Oh, okay, okay.
I'd never been there. And then I continued my flight to Ireland for my first trip to Ireland, where they're all from. They're 100% Irish, a few generations back.
Yeah.
Just a weird twist, you know. It's kind of
Wow, wow.
surreal. Here's here's what people need to know. Since then, we have a great relationship. He grew up Irish Catholic, um,
Hmm.
and what they call Jack Catholic. You know, his wife was like, well, he maybe goes to mass at Christmas, you know, or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He's got some health issues. Um, Although he got COVID and sailed through that like it was a common cold, go figure.
Hmm.
Um, but he's 84 now, so he told me the doctors told him about 3 years ago that he probably had another year left to live, and so
Oh,
he's
wow.
beaten all their odds.
Okay.
I have had the opportunity, Joe, to sit down with him first to get to know him,
Yeah.
and then second to say, because he's like, what do you do? I'm like, well, it's kind of ministry.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a church. It's not quite a church. I interview people on TV,
Hmm.
and he's like, okay. But to
Yeah.
say, what do you think about that? His name is Joe as well, by the way.
Okay.
Uh, so
Okay.
for me to say to him, Joe, well, what do you think about that? What do you think about God? Just just listen. Take the time to listen.
Yeah.
And finally get to the point to say, when he told me that the doctors didn't give him very long, to say, well, do you think you're going to be in heaven? Oh yeah. Well, why?
Why? Yeah.
And then to say, well, the Bible says that if you believe in your heart and confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, then you will be saved. And he looked me right in the eye and he goes, oh, I believe that,
Mm.
you know. And then he
No.
talked a bit about it. And so you talk about the risk of rejection. You talk about maybe a
Yeah.
relationship that's going to be uncomfortable or a pain, frankly, because relatives,
It's complicated. Yeah, for
it
sure.
is. To take that risk and to have it pay off by finding the man who is my DNA and to
Yeah.
have the conversation for eternity, there's no reward, I think, greater than that.
Man. I was going to ask you all these follow-up questions, and I can tell you've been doing this for a long time. It's like you weaved your story in such a way that you talked about the risk factor, you talked about the, you know, people who struggle with rejection and identity issues who are adopted and stuff like that, and that you regretted what you thought you did the first time. And when it presented itself, you're like, no way, I'm getting off my ass. Like, I'm doing this. I am not
Exactly.
letting this go. And so we always talk about the reward that comes with the risk of reaching out and doing something uncomfortable. And I'm assuming you're going to say it was worth taking that risk.
100%. But
Yeah.
here's the other part of it. Some
Mm.
people take that risk and the relationship's not good.
Right.
And so I think it's important to address when it doesn't have the Hollywood ending. It can be a little messy. And that's where I think we go, okay, our economy is not necessarily God's economy.
Hmm.
If he had looked at me and said, don't talk to me about that God stuff, you know,
Yeah.
um, God still honors us obeying him, even when other people don't
Yeah.
respond the way we want them to or the way they should. And
100%,
so
Randy.
he is our reward in that case.
Hmm. 100%, and like I said, we've never met in person, but I kind of feel there's a kindred spirit there because I'm the kind of guy where I would rather try something and fail like colossally, like let the whole world see the failure, because when you succeed, it's equally as big. And so I would rather try it right and go, okay, I suck at that, or that didn't work out, but to know.
Well, okay, so you and I have both interviewed people that have been very successful in different arenas. You and I both know that they will tell
Yeah.
you there
Yep.
is no success without failure.
Yes, sir.
They have failed. And if we look at Proverbs, it's not how many times we get knocked down, how many times we fall. It's how many
Hmm.
times we get back up.
Yeah.
So success will come if you just refuse to give up, no matter how many failures.
Well, like you said, you see these successful people, you're like, well, it's easy for them. Look how big they are. Look how famous they are. Look how wealthy they are. You're like, there's actually a chapter in the book. It's called Thou Shalt Not Covet Thy Neighbor's Ash. And the ash is the journey that that person had to go through to get where they are. I mean,
Mhm.
when they make it look easy, there's probably a lot of pain behind that process. There's a lot of sleepless nights, right?
Yeah. Oh gosh, yes. Every it seems like every
Yeah.
time. I mean, it's that rare overnight success. I didn't have to hardly do anything. I suppose it
No.
does happen, but it's the exception that proves the rule, which is that you got to get out there and take the risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, man, I just wanted to say thank you for being so transparent and honest about that risk that you took, and you already encouraged people who were thinking about it, who have that opportunity to risk it, to get off that pile, get off, deal with that rejection. And I think too, people create a world that they don't yet live in, and so you could have said, "Oh, he's going to hate me. He's not going to want me,"
Right.
and that world that doesn't exist is the world you're living in. You're making decisions in a non-real environment.
It's so I am that guy. I am like expect hope for the best but prepare for the worst. And so I will mentally prepare for all that. Like, and I'm okay with
Yeah.
that. I'm like, okay, go ahead and go to the worst
Mhm.
case scenario. This
Yeah.
guy's a drunkard, a
Yeah.
criminal. Maybe he's in jail. I mean, what? You go, okay, where am I? Am I secure in what God's called me to do in my relationship with Him?
Yeah.
And if you're not, then maybe you need to grow up yourself. But once you're there, you're like, okay, I can walk into any storm because God is with me. And so it's
That's
all
awesome.
uphill from there.
Yeah. Well,
But
like I
and
said,
with
man, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was gonna say that goes to what you're writing about because, by the way, I have read your book,
Mm,
and it is really, really good. And
thank
you
you.
know, all that Job. Come on, none of us are going to be Job. I don't think. That's like worst case scenario right there.
Yeah.
And yet, what does he say at the end of it? He testifies to God's goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he had to get to that place where he said, Lord, I am ashamed of what I've allowed myself to become and what I didn't do because I was so busy blaming you and feeling sorry for myself. But then he got off, he prayed for his friends, and God says, there you go, Job. Now you get everything back. Let's double it. And then the latter half of his life was greater than the first. And
Yeah.
so I'm actually hoping that for you, man. I know you've had a good life and you've talked
Mhm.
about having great family and friends and ministry, but I hope that the latter half of your life, if it's possible, may it be even greater than the first part, Randy.
And it's greater for knowing you, Joe, and being a guest on your program. That's been a bright spot of the day.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, man. Well, there you go. That was my guest, Randy Robison. And it was so great to hear his story of how he was willing to take that risk. So many people allow, fear, doubt, rejection, hurt, hold them back from experiencing new things. And I just think in his case, what he would have missed out on had he allowed his past, that ash, to hold him back. And so I'm so glad that he got off his ash and got to have this amazing experience. And if you're watching this, if you're listening to this as you're driving, walking, taking the train to work, wherever you're going, our hope is that it would encourage you to say yes to those opportunities. Like you said, there's not always going to be that Hollywood ending, but there'll always be that nagging doubt, what if I would have done that? What if I would have tried? So don't let that happen to you. Get off that pile of ash, leave that stuff behind, and be able to move forward and try these new experiences. And like I said there at the end with him, my hope and my prayer is that the latter half of your life will be greater than that of the first. So if you've enjoyed listening to this, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're watching it on YouTube, or you can follow the podcast wherever you listen to them. And if you want to learn more and get the book, just go to getoffyourash.today. And you can also get information if you say, hey, we'd love to have you, Joe, come and share at our church, at our group, at our function, whatever it is. And I would love to come and encourage whoever it is that hears the sound of my voice, that they would be able to let go of their past, understand who they are so that they can launch out into what they want to be. So that's it, my friends. Thank you so much for sticking with us for this newest episode of the podcast, Get Off Your Ash. And God bless you, and we'll see you here next time. Thanks so much for joining us on today's podcast. We hope you found it informative and encouraging. For more information about Get Off Your Ash or to order the book, you can visit www.getoffyourash.today or just search it out on Amazon.